It was an unusually chilly evening in New York City, and the streets buzzed with the kind of energy only the city could create. Emily sat on a cold metal bench in Central Park, bundled up in her worn-out coat. Her backpack sat beside her, weighed down by textbooks, work papers, and a few loose coins that wouldn't even buy her another meal. In her hands was a greasy paper plate with her last slice of pepperoni pizza, a small indulgence after a long shift at the bookstore and hours of classes at the community college. As she took a small bite, trying to savor it, a man approached and sat at the opposite end of the bench. He was tall, with neatly combed brown hair, dressed in a sleek, dark overcoat, and wearing leather shoes that looked far too expensive for this part of the park. Yet something about him seemed off. He looked tired, almost haunted. His eyes didn't match the wealth he wore. They looked lonely, like he was searching for something far beyond material comfort. Emily glanced at him for a moment, then turned her eyes back to her pizza. She was used to ignoring strangers, especially ones who seemed out of place. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed him glance at her plate. It was a subtle look, quick, ashamed, but unmistakably hungry. Without thinking twice, she tore the slice in two and handed one half to him. "You can have this," she said, her voice gentle, almost embarrassed. "It's not much, but it's warm." The man blinked, startled. "Are you sure?" he asked, taken aback. "Yeah, it's just pizza," she replied with a shrug, trying to downplay the fact that it was the only food she had until payday. He took it slowly, as though no one had done something kind for him in a long time. "Thank you," he said quietly, then took a bite. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They sat in silence, eating together like old friends who didn't need words. What Emily didn't know was that the man beside her was James Whitmore, the tech millionaire whose face was rarely seen in public. He had built an app that revolutionized online payments and had more money than he knew what to do with. But after losing his parents and being surrounded by people who only cared about his wealth, James had begun wandering the city in search of something real, something human. And here was this young woman who didn't know who he was, offering her last meal with no expectations. That simple gesture shook him more than any boardroom deal ever had. When she stood to leave, Emily smiled at him. "Take care," she said, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "You too," he replied, watching her disappear into the crowd, still holding half a slice of pizza that tasted more meaningful than anything he'd eaten in years. The next afternoon, Emily returned to the same bench in Central Park, not expecting anything but a quiet moment between classes. Her life was a constant shuffle of responsibilities, school, work, bills, and dreams she hadn't dared to fully define yet. She carried her usual coffee in a paper cup, lukewarm and a little too bitter, and sat in the same spot where she had shared her last slice of pizza the day before. She didn't expect him to return, but there he was. James Whitmore, now dressed in a casual hoodie and jeans, stood beside her with a box of fresh pizza in his hands and an awkward smile on his face. "I thought I'd return the favor," he said, opening the box and offering her a slice. Emily blinked in surprise but laughed softly and accepted. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," James replied, sitting beside her. As they ate together again, this time with warm slices and laughter breaking through the chilly air, a connection began to grow. Over the next week, James showed up every day, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with books, sometimes with just stories to tell. He never mentioned his real identity, never hinted at his fortune, and Emily never asked. She liked him for his gentle nature, his curiosity, and the fact that he listened. Really listened. James, in turn, was drawn to Emily's honesty and resilience. She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. She was kind without effort, strong without needing to shout about it, and grounded in a way that made his high-rise penthouse life feel like a distant illusion. One evening, as they sat on that bench watching the sunset paint the city orange and gold, James finally broke the truth. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, nervously fidgeting with the sleeve of his hoodie. My name isn't just James. I'm James Whitmore. I run Whitmore Tech. Emily looked at him, puzzled. Then her eyes widened as the name sank in. She had heard of the company. Everyone had. It was one of the biggest names in Silicon Valley. She stared at him in silence, unsure of what to say. I didn't lie to you, he continued gently. I just didn't want that part of me to be what mattered. I've met hundreds of people who only see the money. But you gave me half your last slice of pizza. You didn't know who I was, and you were still kind. Emily's eyes softened. So what now? James smiled. Now, I'd like to keep sharing pizza with you, maybe somewhere warmer next time. She chuckled, then nodded. Only if I get to pick the toppings. They laughed together, and in that moment, surrounded by city lights and the last of the day's warmth, two people from different worlds found something real, rooted not in status or wealth, but in a single, shared act of kindness.